It's like his character made this total flip from the oafish buffoon who doesn't know right from left, and now he's entitled and thinks the throne ought to be his. It makes no sense. Even though they tried to force it in the end, it doesn't line up with the Lion King movie.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of A Lost Plot, the podcast by storytellers for storytellers so that we can tell better stories ourselves. As always, I'm your host, Maverick, and today we have back with us one of our favorite co-hosts, Andrew, to review the most recent release by Disney. You know, we're all so excited for a new Disney movie. Not. No, today we're talking about Mufasa, one of the, yeah, I guess I should go over the notes on this one. It's 2024, just came out, American musical drama action adventure film. Screenplay, thank you, Jeff Nathanson, directed by Barry Jenkins, and based on Disney's The Lion King. Wow, in case no one knew what Mufasa's from. Yeah, Andrew, you want to take us away with the opinions and first thoughts on this film?
This film is the perfect example of why IP doesn't make a good movie.
Yeah, actually, that's a very good take on that. And we've seen this a lot in recent cinemas, this idea that, we have established IP, people like this franchise already, let's just make another movie in it, because why? Disney and actually all of Hollywood really has become very corporate, and the idea is what will turn a profit, and people have gotten sick of it, and it's no longer effective. The theater reflected that when we went to watch this, but beyond that too, frankly, the storyline itself was dog water, to be mild, and needs to be thrown out. So, let's get into the review and then talk about why that's the case. Andrew, what did you get for the 9-point rating system for this guy?
Well, I already know what yours is because we recorded this before, but it's 0.8.
Yeah, he got pretty low there. I got a 1.1, so very low on the scale. This is lower than what I got for Joker Folie à Deux, which when I watched that, I thought this is gonna be the worst film I've reviewed all year. Turns out I was wrong because I watched this sinking ship of a movie and was more than disappointed. So we're going
This
to
is why we should do Sonic movies, because they will probably be at least better than this.
Yeah, okay. Well, that gets into the whole thing of like comedies, and comedies are just fundamentally different and have a different purpose. But
Sure.
This one was more, and clearly, The Lion King, the first one, was clearly more of a drama with a lot of comedic relief in the middle, but the bent was primarily a dramatic bent. And the same thing went with this one. The problem is, it sucked. So, let's get into why. The opening scene, actually, I guess we should talk about what it was about before we get into that. Andrew, you want to give people a summary of this film?
Yeah, I just want to let you guys know, Maverick is rushing through this because it's so painful to review. He's just like, yeah.
Honestly, it's like 3 minutes in, it's 3 minutes too long already.
Yeah. No summary is this movie doesn't deserve a summary. It's pretty much just Mufasa loses his parents, finds a new family, doesn't fit in, somehow fits in, fights a bad guy, lives with Scar, steals Scar's girl, who wasn't actually his girl, breaks bro code, and then has an epic endgame battle that is nowhere near epic, and then becomes king of Pride Rock due to an earthquake. And that's the story.
Yeah. And let me just say, we'll get into all of it. The one thing I will say is, the first recording failed on this one, so we had to re-record it, but I remembered watching this in the theaters and going, there is so much wrong with this film, and I'm not going to catch it all. Like, that's how bad it was that
it's horrible.
It's actually awful. Do not watch it. Do not give Disney your money for this one. It is not worth your time at all. Yeah, now let's get into the review. So the opening scene. What was your thoughts on the opening scene, Andrew?
I mean, it was okay. It's pretty stock for Disney, at least nowadays. Like I'll say the music sucked. Okay, so then that will be repeated throughout the rest of this. I
Mm-hmm.
remember watching this, going, "What the butt is this song? I don't know why we're listening to this. What the heck?" I hate the music in this film. Almost no. I think I hate it just as much as Joker 2. They're both equal footing, just for different reasons. Joker two's music
Sure.
sucked because it was out of place. This music sucked because it's just bad music. Um, and whoever directed it needs to be fired,
Yeah.
along with everyone else who took part in the creation of this movie.
Yeah, I
Aside
would.
from the voice actors aren't really to blame here, but
Right.
you know,
I mean, I would feel bad to have my name associated with this film because it's not going to reflect good on you for trying to get into anything else.
yeah. But on the whole, like the opener in terms of plot was fine. Like, okay, there's a flash flood. Mufasa gets separated from his parents, and then you also have that kind of segue into that where you have Rafiki telling the story to Simba's child, his daughter, and you have Timon and Pumbaa. Like all that is fine for a setup. It's not like amazing, but it's not horrible.
Right. It's very clearly trying to call back to what we already are familiar with, right? We have Simba, we have his daughter, we have Rafiki, we have Timon and Pumbaa, we have all the classic characters, and it's supposed to remind us, hey, remember, you like these characters, they're great characters. So you're gonna like this movie too, right? Trying to emotionally associate a film we know is good. At least, well, they have the redo. It's based off of the redone version with the computer graphic uh, creatures compared to the clearly hand drawn ones
Yeah.
back in the day. So, um, where was I going with that? The point is, it sucked. No, the point is like they were trying to emotionally associate it one with the other, and it's not like a bad idea. It's not a bad concept, especially because you're trying to make sure that people know why they're there, right? Oh yeah, this is a movie that has to do with something we're already familiar with. You get the same thing with the Dune Prophecy show. You get the same thing with like uh, a lot of the Star Wars stuff that comes out nowadays. And so it's like they're trying to bring some semblance of what you are familiar with and appreciate to carry it forward. Not a bad technique, especially if you're using established IP. In this case, it was just fine. And if that's what's fine, it's a bad sign of what's to come, and that's what comes on. So you get this character Mufasa. He's introduced to us as this little cub, and his parents are like, "You're a fast runner, and you are the leader of our tribe." Oh, now there's a flash flood. Bye bye, and he goes off and meets this kid Taka as he's about to be eaten by crocodiles. Gets integrated into their tribe. What were your thoughts on Mufasa as a character who they have just introduced to the film? And their development of him from there.
Okay. I want to preface this with the fact that when we get to Scar, that will be my actual rant. So anything you hear before and after that is not really me ranting, even if it sounds like it. It's just that bad. Mufasa is a character that is just the perfect character. Like he has no flaws other than his need to see his mother. But in the movie, it's not played out in such a way that it is a flaw, if that makes sense. It is told to us that he has a flaw, but it is not shown to us that he has this flaw. There is no execution or actions that he takes that would be seen as flaws from the outside perspective. He is the perfect character who is discriminated against by other lions because he is an outsider. And the thing is that is also really unfortunate is there's all this foreshadowing of the male lion Obasi, who's the leader of this tribe, who keeps saying, "Oh, he's an outsider. He's going to undermine you, Taka. Don't be his friend." And then it never plays out. And it's like there's all this stuff that they put into and invest in Mufasa's character that never play out in a way that it should. And he's just ultimately the epitome of what a good guy should be, and not a compelling protagonist in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I mean, like the only thing that he actually does, which they kind of point as being a good thing, is he violates the bro code, which was totally not cool. I'm sorry, your
Yeah,
guy, if he's going for a girl, you don't go for the same girl if you know it and you're supporting him. It's totally violated that. Anyways, not a big deal overall because the bigger deal is that he was just knight in shining armor in every way. Regardless of what we say about Back to the Future, this one takes the cake for being absolute dog water
We
on
can agree on
a
that.
character who's a knight in shining armor. Perfect. Sucks because well, one, if he doesn't have flaws to grow from, he doesn't have a character arc, right? He can't grow. How does this character teach us something in regards to the themes and values of the film? How are we going to learn something by watching this and by understanding what's going on that we can then take with us and go, oh yes, I should be responsible, or I should be a better leader in my life, or I should love the people around me, or I should, whatever the themes are, the values and the messages of the movie. You can't have that if you don't have someone who learns throughout the story. And in this case, if he starts out as perfect, he's not going to learn anything different. He's going to be the same person at the beginning that he is at the end. And that's kind of what you get in this film. So at the very start, you have a character that is uncompelling. Beyond that, the dialogue that they use in this film is very awful. And that's one of the reasons why this is a bad film. And usually when I personally am I have big pet peeves with dialogue, but you can have cheesy dialogue, bad dialogue, and still have a good film. We've seen this in movies like Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, right? Star Wars Episode 4, classic movie. Star Wars Episode 4 also has some of the cheesiest dialogue you've ever seen, right? So you can look at it and go, this movie's cheesy, but it still has a great story, a great message, and all those things. So dialogue in and of itself being bad doesn't kill a movie. But when the dialogue, going back to what Andrew said, kills the momentum by telling instead of showing, you've destroyed your plot, because you can't go around telling everyone this is what's going to happen or this is how you should feel. You need to show them how they should feel. And someone might say one thing but mean another, and those inferences and all that stuff, that's part of the beauty of good dialogue, is you show and don't tell. But in this movie, they had a lot of examples where it was like, oh, my name is, for example, Simba. When he first gets introduced to Taka, which ends up becoming Scar, spoiler alert, not a big spoiler because you know from the start, when Mufasa meets Scar as a child, the mother of Scar says, no, we can't take in an outsider. He's going to get killed. And then Scar slash Taka ends up saying, well, I really like him. I want a friend, basically. And then his mom's like, oh, okay, I guess we'll keep him. And then that's that. And when you have dialogue that just pushes and rams the story forward into how they want it to be, you just look at that and say, that's not how anyone would act in a normal situation, or even in the situation you set up. Even if it is a convoluted situation, it still doesn't work. And they have that time after time after time after time after time after time after time in this movie. So that's probably my biggest pet peeve with this, is that when you come to actual dialogue, right, when it comes to moving the plot forward, these things end up becoming a prohibiting moving the story forward. And at the end of the day, you as the audience can't genuinely believe in the messages and the ideas of this film because you're so caught up in thinking that just didn't seem genuine based off the characters they created. So that's all I have to say on that for now. Andrew, you have anything else to add?
On dialogue, no. I do want to add to Mufasa though. If you listen to any of our podcast on Star Wars Episode 7, 8, or 9, you'll hear a lot of rants about why Rey is a flawed protagonist as well. And I think Mufasa is the perfect example of that type of protagonist played out in the worst possible way. Because as much as I hate Rey's character, I think they did have there's some credit due there, at least in Episode 7. But Mufasa is the perfect example of the character who loses their parents and has abandonment issues that are never played out, and he just ends up being the perfect character throughout the rest of the film. Whereas Rey, same thing. Abandonment issues are supposed to be her fatal flaw. And the thing is they're not played out super well, but they're at least played out in some way, shape, or form. Whereas Mufasa's characters aren't played out at all, and that in part is due to the pacing of the movie, where they just rush through everything, And then there's instances where they just jar you as the audience and they switch to something completely unrelated with no warning whatsoever, specifically in the introduction of Rafiki, which we can get to his character later. But I think Mufasa's character, again, is the ultimate example of a protagonist who is perfect, who has no character arc, no development, and no challenges throughout the movie, and ultimately leaves the audience feeling left unsatisfied, even if they don't really know why they are.
Yeah, exactly. And some of that, to be honest, just I mean, it explains a lot of what we would normally cover later in the podcast of, okay, well, do they grow as a person, or do they have issues that are compelling in any way? No, because the baseline out here is shot. And if the baseline is shot, everything else is probably going to get shot as well. So it's really unfortunate that, because here's the thing, like if you look at the character of Mufasa that we get in the original Lion King, right? He is a strong leader, and he has a lot of fears about and even some insecurities that from his role as both a father and a king, but he still steps into those, understanding those responsibilities. And to come to that point takes a lot of maturity and a lot of growth to get to an understanding of that strength that you have at the beginning of The Lion King. And so just looking at a character like that, you look at that and say they could have a ton of potential with this and really go places from someone so that they can complete a really compelling arc. And so it is just unfortunate from a bystander's viewpoint that they took something that had a lot of potential and did nothing with it. So really unfortunate. There's not much more I think we can say there, but I do want to go into both. I want to talk about the villains. Let's talk about the villains now, because the fact of the matter is that they were intended to heighten the tension of the movie, right? To push the protagonist forward by saying, "Oh, you have this big threat of these tribe of white lions by King Kiros, who is the leader of their tribe, who is trying to take over all of Africa and become the ultimate Giga Chad king of the lions." And he's trying to basically take out the last protesters, being not Simba, Mufasa and Taka slash Scar. And that's kind of like the impetus for pushing them forward in the film. What were your thoughts on the villains that they introduce?
I think it's interesting because, in my mind, there are three different villains within this film. Because when you think about it, what is the villain in a film? It is the object in the way of the protagonist's goals, right? So, in the first half of the or first section of the film, I'd say the villain, or rather the object in Mufasa's way, is Obasi, and I don't think he's done well. The second villain is Kairos, and then the
Mm-hmm.
third villain is Scar, and Scar is where I have the biggest issue with this movie, but we'll get to that later.
Sure.
Obasi, I think, is an interesting character because he is set up in such a way that I put him in the villain camp, but he should almost be like a supporting role, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But
And to be
he's
clear to
done,
the audience, Obasi is the father of
yeah,
Taka slash Scar. He's the one who's basically fulfilling what was foreshadowed earlier on, where Taka's mom goes, "Oh, you're just gonna get killed as an outsider if we bring you in, so I'm not gonna do that." Right? He's supposed to be the threat that's looming over Mufasa's head,
yeah,
supposedly. Anyways,
yeah. And so Obasi's character he has valid concerns. Okay, he says he's an outsider. He's going to usurp Utaka. He's pushing back against Mufasa's existence or coexistence within their pride. Um, but then he has this sudden flip, just out of nowhere. Well, I guess not out of nowhere, but it's at one instance of Mufasa helping his wife Eshe to survive. Eshe is the mother of Taka,
right?
and he just flips and he goes, "Oh, I bow at your feet, Mufasa. We totally accept you. I owe you a great debt." Which it doesn't make sense for his character. And this is where I say there are certain things in this movie that were jarring. And I think in a nutshell what this movie does is it places dialogue and actions upon characters rather than having those things flow out of them. And so you have this in Obasi, in some sense, specifically when he just completely flips a switch from going from this massive prejudice and distrust of Mufasa to just, oh, we totally accept you now because you saved my wife one time. A much more believable outcome, because I do want to provide you guys, the listeners, with what me and Maverick might think would be a better alternative in some of these instances. And
And
granted,
that's fair. That's fair.
the better alternative would be for this movie to not exist, but we will try to address small instances of this.
Sure.
I think a better alternative would probably have been for Obasi to kind of reluctantly accept Mufasa as saying, like, look, like thinking, okay, I can't just write him off now. He saved my wife's life. But that doesn't
Hmm.
mean he's just going to accept him per se. And so it was like the movie needed to progress and they needed Obasi to trust Mufasa. So they just forced this instance where he would save Eshe and then have Obasi just accept him because of that one instance. Um, Whereas the interesting thing, and I'm not trying to go too long here, Maverick, but
Sure. Sure.
the interesting thing is that the Lion King does what they tried to do in a masterful way. It does quickly go through the plot. Like you have like 10-20 minutes of Simba's interaction with his dad and all of the attributes and lessons that he was imbued with or taught by his father. You have all of his interaction with the Scar all the way up to the Stampede, and you have all of this character development built up efficiently. And that's the difference between the Lion King and Mufasa. If the Lion King does things efficiently and they get through it quickly. It's an hour and a half long movie, which is very short compared to today's movies.
Well, it's
This
even
movie was
shorter than this movie.
yeah, this movie's 2 hours long, and yet it rushes. It doesn't
Hmm.
do things efficiently. It rushes through the plot just to get to the end result that we have at the end, which is very unsatisfying.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I will say that I didn't hate Obasi as a villain, and I think my problem necessarily isn't with him in this film. I think he's fine. I think that the issues with him is that while I don't trust the writers of this story to have played it out well, the fact of the matter is you don't actually get a chance to see really how Obasi feels about that whole situation regarding Simba and his wife. And that is because as soon as Simba saves Obasi's wife, Obasi has that whole thing where he's like, I owe you a great debt. And then immediately after that, Simba and Taka are exiled while Obasi tries to fend off King Kairos, who comes and takes over his kingdom. So, hypothetically, yes, you could have had a very interesting dynamic play out there between Obasi and Simba. I mean, and between Obasi and Mufasa, excuse me, and how that continued to develop. But because they quickly move on from there, you don't really get a chance to even see that. So, in the hypothetical, it could have been good. Was it going to be good if they had played it out? No, because the writers here sucked. But, you know, I'm not going to take points away for Obasi specifically. And he's also kind of the three villains you mentioned, he's the smallest one. He has the shortest role. So, not going to get caught up on that.
Agreed. I figure we covered all of the interaction with Obasi and Mufasa and Scar by covering Obasi, so we can move on to the
Right.
second of the
Yeah,
movie now,
totally fair.
which is Kairos. I don't know if you want to talk about Kairos, what your thoughts were.
I mean, he is. You know he's gonna be a bad villain from his first song, dude. They were trying to do the "Be Prepared" and "Run It Back," and it's this whole song about saying bye bye, and it is probably one of the worst songs in the whole film. Uh,
Deadpool did it better.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. um. So King Kairos, what do I think about him? Well, he's stupid for being a lead. Like one, he's obviously trying to do the classic Machiavellian prince thing where he's like, I rule by fear. Fear is the best way to get people to follow me, and he's trying to embody that, right? If you want to get philosophical about this villain, but to be perfectly honest, he's just turns out to be cruel for no reason, and he chases them up snowy mountains when he doesn't have the food to do it or the sustenance to do it, and then he's like, oh crap, we're going to die chasing these people, but I still hate them, so I must kill them. And like random motivations like that continue to drive this man to near extinction. And the idea that this man could even lead all of Africa's prides is questionable to say the least. But So a lot of the things he does are nonsensical. They're frankly irrational, and I thought it was bad for the villain in The Riders of Rohirrim, which we recently reviewed. Check it out on the podcast. I thought that villain was bad, right? Because he has some of these same traits, but at least he has some logic and some motivation that pushes him forward, that has steps that bring him to his point. And I can't even believe I'm defending Wolf on this podcast because he was an awful villain. But he was better than this because this guy just was going nowhere. So, yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. I don't. Otherwise, I'm just gonna start ranting.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch, or I didn't review The War of Rohirrim on here, but I did watch it, and I'm
Mhm.
agreeing with what Maverick said. Liked it. Wolf wasn't a great villain, but I would watch War of the Rohirrim any day over this movie.
Facts.
Um, well, Kairos. I think Kairos, like cinematically, looks like an awesome villain. All right, he's the
Sure.
albino lion. He's head of this like ferocious tribe, and the first shot of them, you're like, oh, this could be cool. And then you hear the stupid song, and you go, okay, they look cool and they're retarded. Well, moving on from that, then. And I think that Kairos' villain is just there again. Potential here wasted. It's like these writers have like the start of a good idea, and then it just gets ruined. It's almost like there's one person working there that's like, "Oh, I have a good idea," and the rest of the writers go, "Let's do this," and he goes, "Oh shoot," and then they do something horrible with it, and so you get
Yeah.
the potential, but none of the execution. And so Kairos' villain is like, in comparison to Wolf, he has some justification for what he's doing, but it's kind of stupid because he's like, I'm going to conquer this one region, and he conquers it, and Mufasa and Scar get away, and then he pursues them into the snowy mountains, and it's just like, okay, interesting, you're gonna die, and then all of his pride is like, you're gonna die, and then Scar comes to him, and he goes, I won't kill you, even though you're the heir that I've supposedly been tracking.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll be buddies. Shake on it. Let's go kill your brother slash stepbrother. I don't even know. Adopted
Adopted
brother.
brother. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Which they fail at doing too, but that's his own problem as well because he let Mufasa give some lame version of a Captain America speech to a bunch of animals, and then he ultimately gets drowned by a rock.
Yeah. Turns out the way to defeat your arch nemesis is to be better at swimming.
I wouldn't know. Actually, I wouldn't know. I don't know why I said that. Anyways, we can move on to another character because I
Sure.
think
Yeah.
there's not much to talk about here.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's like because he was fundamentally written so poorly, he was it wasn't even clear what he was fighting against or why he was fighting against
yeah,
it. Other than it's not even like a grudge that has some motivation. Once again, going back to the Riders of Rohirrim, which is a terrible villain. At least you had the motivation that his father got killed by this man, and he's vowing revenge on his father. And in this case, he goes, "Okay, both of you are dead because one of my soldiers, I guess it was his son. Maybe it's not so bad.
yeah, yeah. I was about to say I can't believe I would even try to defend this movie, but it
Yeah.
was his. So, but then he says Scar can replace his son. Like what?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was at that point in the film that I went, okay, yeah, his villain was weak to begin with. Now he's just an utter fool
Yeah.
for the rest of the film, and he deserves to die.
Right.
Um, I do want to save Scar for last, if that's okay, because I think that there's a lot of points that go into him that are kind of like the cream of the crop of why this film was poorly done. But we talked about Mufasa, Obasi, Kairos,
There's
Sarabi's
Rafiki.
character. Yeah,
If
there's
you want to talk
Rafiki, Sarabi,
Sarabi,
and Zazu are the three that I have left.
sure.
Eshe, I guess, could use some mentioning. Actually, of all of the characters, I think hers was the best.
Yeah, the
Um,
wife of Obasi.
yeah, I
Yeah.
think her character actually has some motivation. She sees a lot of potential in Mufasa. She's raised him since he was a cub. Despite all of the rest of the pride's prejudice and fear about him, she trusts him with her life. And as you can see later on in their relationship, she was valid in doing that because he's willing to defend her and he saves her life. She's been training him to find his parents. She has lots of empathy, and she takes on this motherly role for Mufasa, and Mufasa, even after she's gone, continues to recognize her as this motherly figure. And so I think she does great as a side character. This is probably one of the places the movie got most points for me, even though it didn't get very many because she's barely in it. But like I don't really have problems with Eshe's character, to be completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
Despite I think the only problem I'd have is the very beginning when she goes, "Oh, we can't bring him in," and then Taka goes, "No, but please, Mom, I need a birthday gift," and she goes, "Okay."
Yeah,
Um,
basically.
I don't know if you had any thoughts on Eshe other than that.
No, I mean, yeah, she was fine. Also, similar to Obasi, even though she's decent, once again, she doesn't stick around for a long time. And so it's not like she has a huge impact on the film anyways. It's not.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
hypothetically, they could, right? Like, I guess you would even look at Mufasa in the first Lion King film. He had a huge impact on the film, but he only exists for like 5 scenes total.
Yeah,
So it's you can have a huge impact on a film, even though you're in it for very few moments. But yeah, I mean, she was just fine. Nothing to
yeah,
note.
yeah. In terms of, I mean, we could talk about. Let's take. Do you have anything to say about Sarabi? I think she was just a mid
Yeah,
version of
same. I mean,
Nala.
I don't think it's worth
Or
noting someone who didn't
yeah,
really add a lot. She was the catalyst for the conflict between Taka and Mufasa, and that's pretty much
yeah,
it, right? She didn't
yep,
do anything particularly to deserve that, is what it is.
yep. And she had a much worse version of "Can You Feel the Love Tonight" with Mufasa. So sorry, Mufasa, your son can sing better than you. And that was if I considered this movie canon. That said, let's move on.
Cool.
Um, Rafiki and Zazu. Do you want to take one of them? I don't think we should.
Um,
We need to spend much time on them, but I figure we might as well cover them.
I mean, Zazu, I don't know. I mean, some of these characters is just like they were so overshadowed by how awful everything else was that they actually look okay in this situation. Zazu was supposed to be funny. He wasn't funny. He was supposed to. The only thing he really did was say, "Oh, look, the enemy lions are coming," and oh, let me help guard our tracks in the snow by pushing snow off the mountainside. Okay, you know, that's pretty much all he did in the film total, and that ends up being undone by Scar anyways. So
Yeah,
kind of a useless character.
yeah.
Shoot.
And I
Dang
mean,
it.
Zazu's character, to be honest, I felt like other than him putting the snow on their tracks, like did not serve a. I guess he was a scout, but again, his character didn't serve a purpose. It was like his existence served a purpose, if that makes sense. They needed a bird, and he was the
Yeah.
bird
He
because
was
they
a
needed a
tool.
scout. Yeah, and that's why I say the actions and the dialogue were put onto the characters; they didn't flow out of them. And Zazu is a good example of that. In terms of Rafiki, I think his character was the he wasn't as bad as Scar, but that's just because Scar was done dirty, whereas Rafiki was just pointless and stupid, and everything about him was just, why are we even here? I
Right.
have visions. Do my visions come true? No, but I feel it in my heart. Perfect description of everything Disney does. Is this a
Yeah.
good movie? No, but they're following their heart, so it's a good movie, bro. Trust.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck? And even his introduction, again, it was jarring. Like we
Mhm.
didn't need it. He didn't actually serve a purpose in this movie at all, if you think about it. He doesn't have a motivation to being there other than he needs to leave his tribe. He says he has this vision of his brother that ends up being Mufasa at the end, but
Mhm.
everything about him is very self-contained. Meaning, like,
Yeah.
if you took him out of the movie, what does it change? We don't get to see a weird, I want to go into the water, but the fish will not let me. And it's like, okay, what the heck?
Yeah.
Um, that he doesn't help in their fight. He doesn't help guide them to Malele.
I mean,
Um,
hypothetically, that's what he's doing. The only thing I will say is that his initial purpose in the film, the reason they're following him, is because supposedly he knows the way to Milele, and then it turns out this was just a vision he had, and his visions never came true before, so they're kind of just chasing phantoms. But it turns out he's
sure,
right. Why? Because he believed in his heart that what
I have a
he
big
had.
heart. It is bigger than yours.
Yeah. So yeah, that was literally his arc. was I have
Yeah.
crazy visions that have never come true, but you guys all listen to me because you guys are idiots, and it turns out this time I'm right. Bam.
I think one of the funniest things in the movie, and it wasn't funny because it was supposed to be funny, it was funny how stupid it was, is when he sees the tree. Oh, a tree.
The opener, the only thing I'll say about Rafiki, other than what we've already mentioned, is that his opener is one of those ones where it's supposed to add an additional context to add emotion to him as a character, right? It shows him being ostracized from his people and saying, "Oh, you need to go off on your own." But you're left with this whole side tangent. You start to wonder, why does this exist? What is the purpose of showing this? Because you would have gotten the same emotion for who Rafiki is as a person and how much you care about him if they had just randomly met this monkey traveling across the plains of Africa. Like, it would have been no different. And so that by itself, if you take that metric and go, does this scene add anything that would change how the audience feels about this character or what they think about this character? If no, probably should be cut. Would have saved us 3 minutes, 5 minutes of time, which I would very much like to have back. So, there was a lot of that kind of stuff with Rafiki.
Yeah, and Rafiki's character, like, yeah, I'm just gonna agree with everything you said pretty much, so we can move on. Um,
To your
yeah,
favorite, Taka Scar, the greatest villain to ever grace the the beautiful screen of cinema.
okay. You're gonna see me get so frustrated right now
All right,
because
you have like a minute and a half to give your point, so
give me a few minutes, okay? This is the part of the podcast you guys have been waiting for because this is why this movie sucked.
don't worry, I'll cut it
First,
out.
first and foremost, you need to ask yourself, why was this movie made? This movie was made as a precursor to The Lion King, but not to tell Mufasa's story because we don't need to know who Mufasa is. We know who he is. This movie was based on one line of dialogue in The Lion King when Scar says that this throne was stolen from him. And that is what this movie is about, the throne being stolen from Scar. And so, in theory, this could have been a very cool movie. It could have told Scar's story. And Scar as a whole is a very interesting character, despite how little we see of him in The Lion King. I think he's a great villain, despite the fact that, like, we don't get his origins. But all in all, he's played out very well in The Lion King. In this movie, his beef with Mufasa ends up being the stupidest beef you could ever have with someone. And then even his reactions to that beef end up being stupid. So let's start from the beginning. We have Mufasa and Taka as children, who we all knew was Scar from the beginning, except for Jenny. I don't know why she didn't know that. But he is Scar from the beginning, despite the fact he doesn't have a scar on his face yet, or he isn't called Scar, and he's having great time with Mufasa. From the beginning, they mess up Scar's character because Scar's character is maniacal. He is devious. He is a trickster. That is his strong suit. And he points this out, and Mufasa gives no pushback in The Lion King. He says, I have a lion's worth of intellect. I don't know the exact line, but he basically says, I got all the brains, and Mufasa got all the brawn. Which is true as the movie plays out. Mufasa doesn't tout himself as being incredibly smart. He is honorable, and he is just, and he is strong. He is the epitome of what a lion ought to be, whereas Scar is small and weak, cowardly, yet ambitious and smart and intelligent. And this isn't played out at all whatsoever in this movie. He is the biggest idiot in this entire movie. He is not intelligent in any way, shape, or form. They try to make him comedic relief when he can't flirt with Zarabi, and it's just ends up being stupid, and it makes his character feel like, what are we doing here? And then when he finds out Mufasa cheats on him, he breaks bro code, which, albeit, it's a justifiable reason to be mad at your friend. Not a justifiable reason to go to the murder of both of your parents and all of the people you knew growing up and say, hey, I want to kill this guy. I'm not going to lie, Maverick. If you broke bro code, I wouldn't do that to you. And I would hope you
Appreciate
wouldn't.
that.
I would hope you
But I'm
wouldn't
not
do the
breaking bro
same.
code, bro.
Um, Not that I'm saying that either of us should break bro code. I'm just saying, in the
Yeah, of
event that it
course.
happens, that is the extreme of all extremes of a reaction. Let's say that that reaction was justified, though. Okay, well, bear with me now. We'll say that his reaction was justified, and he hates Mufasa now. What isn't justified is him then going to save Mufasa from being killed by Kairos in the end of the movie and getting his, iconic scar. They forced the action onto him because he needed to have a scar by the end of the movie.
Hmm.
Horrible way of doing it. And then after having this revelation, after all of the times he could have tried to save Mufasa, he just had to do it this time. He then goes to Mufasa and says, "Oh, please do not kill me." And Mufasa says, "Oh, I can never call you my brother again." He goes, "Okay, call me Scar." Again, forcing the lines of dialogue. It's like, what? No, you don't get to pick your new name. You're
Yeah.
being shamed. Don't, no, stop it. Shut up.
Yeah.
And then after being shown mercy, then he gets pissed off at Mufasa? What? Why? Why
Hmm.
are you? What is wrong with you? It's
Hmm.
like his character made this total flip from the oafish buffoon who doesn't know right from left and got pissed off at his adopted brother for taking the woman of his dreams, who, by the way, he met like 24 hours before that. So,
Right.
classic homeschooler. Um, and now he's entitled and thinks the throne ought to be his. It makes no sense. Even though they tried to force it in the end, it doesn't line up with the Lion King movie. And it's why I just consider this a completely separate universe where Scar's an idiot.
The only thing I would add is, even looking at that situation, you know from the start of this film that both Mufasa and Scar are not going to be on good terms by the end of the film. That being said, you also know that they are part of the same tribe by the end of the film as well. And so that in and of itself creates an interesting dynamic and rather difficult line to tote as the writers to make sure that actually happens. And if I were the ones writing this film, I would spend probably a good 80% of my emphasis on just that dynamic to make sure that whole scenario works out in a satisfying way. Clearly, well, I don't know what they spent their time doing, probably smoking pot, because they did not know what they were writing in this film and they did not carry it out well. So I agree with
Yeah,
everything Andrew said, surprisingly enough, because, when do we ever agree? But
true.
but in this case, yeah, there's nothing I can add to that. He's really, unfortunately, just shot so hard in this film. He shot out of a cannon and never coming back the same.
Um, I do also want to say, along the lines of like making a movie that's a prequel to established IP. There's one instance of where and I don't say they do it wonderfully, but they do it well enough, and that's the prequel trilogy in Star Wars, specifically the Revenge of the Sith. You see these two characters who, again, it's pretty much a few lines of dialogue in Episode 4 where you have Obi-Wan and Darth Vader confronting each other, and he tells
Hmm.
him the student has now become the master. He says, "If you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can even imagine." And
Hmm.
it's like, okay, what is the history between these two? You also have the dialogue where Obi-Wan talks about how he knew Luke's father. Then you
Hmm.
find out that Darth Vader is Luke's father, and it's like all these little pieces that Lucas is dropping there, and you're going, okay, how is this going to play out? And so, I mean, I don't know, I was like 4 years old when these movies came out, but still, like talking to people who were old enough to remember this, there's a lot that was banking on 1, 2, and 3, which is why I think it gets a lot of hate. But also, I think Episode 3 does a pretty good job of showing Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship fall apart.
Hmm.
Um,
Right.
Ultimately culminating in that battle on Mustafar. And you go, okay, I can see how he went from Anakin, the father of Luke Skywalker, this amazing, fearless leader, excellent star pilot, to being this feared, tyrannical warlord known as Darth Vader in episodes 4,
Hmm.
5, and 6.
Right.
This movie has all those pieces, but they forced it all in there just because they have established IP and they want to make money. And it's not how you make a good movie. And the thing is you may say, I don't know the intent of the directors. I'm sorry. Disney's actions speak louder than their words, and they have established IP and don't know what to do with themselves other than just scratch their own back and go, look, another movie of established IP. On another vein of thought, just really quickly, and I told Maverick this after we watched the movie, I think what they should have done with this movie has had a Loki Thor type dynamic where Scar is the maniacal trickster. Scar does have ambitions, but he is not destined for the throne per se. And it makes so much more sense too when you watch the Lion King movie. And he doesn't have this hatred for Mufasa so much. I mean, he does, but his hatred for him is more of I want to be king and you are king.
Mm-hmm.
He
Right.
has all of this pent up rage towards Simba because in the line of succession, he is the next king. But when Simba is born, that is just destroyed for him. And that's when he decides, okay, this is what's going to be the catalyst for me now wanting to kill Mufasa and Simba. And that's why he does what he does. He doesn't have the ambitions to kill Mufasa absent Simba's birth.
Right.
That's what starts him off. And that's why it makes so much more sense for him to be the trickster that maybe Mufasa is coming into his own and he has to fight this war against other lions and he has to establish himself as the king of Pride Rock in this region within the plains of Africa. And maybe
Mm-hmm.
Scar is the one who helps establish him as that. And his wanting to do so comes out of the fact that he sees himself as king one day after Mufasa is gone. And that's taken from him in Simba's birth. I'm not saying it'd be amazing. I'm saying I'm just trying to think of how to make this movie better. And I think this
Yeah.
would have definitely been an instance of when it would have been better than how that played out.
Sure. Well, you could even do something with that in regards to the Shadowlands, right? In regards to maybe that would have originally been under Mufasa's reign, but part of the trickster aspect of Scar was that he ended up actually sowing division because he was trying to create a world unto himself. And while it was subverted, and maybe it wasn't clear that necessarily he was the one that did it, and maybe he was, maybe he wasn't, but there wasn't enough to push him out of the pride. It was enough to make him be kind of shunned by the pride. So he's a little bit of an outcast. Like, you could do things, there's so many different ways you could go with that, right? That's a few thoughts from Andrew. That's a few thoughts from me. Like, there's definitely things you could have done with this to make this a very interesting dynamic. And that's, once again, why I said when it comes to what we know about these characters, this is what we know. This is what we know should be the case by the end of the film. So, how can you do that well? And they should have spent a lot more time focusing on that than on focusing about a song where King Kairos is saying bye bye 20 million times to a screen.
Yeah.
So that's it. Lasting impact of the film. You think this film is going to have a lasting impact? It's based on established IP. So is it going to live in the collective psyche of the universe for years to come, just like The Lion King did?
I mean, let me ask you this. Did the new Lion King have a lasting impact? No, because they were just redoing established IP. Do
Well,
I
yeah.
think this movie will have an impact? I hope not. I think this movie is just a sign of the times. It's just a sign that Disney is in decline and they're struggling to find new inspiration for their movies. And it's a recent trend of them to just try to make live action iterations of their movies. And even though this isn't truly a live action iteration, they're kind of going for the more realistic look.
Right.
Um, I mean, you can see that in even more projects they have upcoming with like their Lilo and Stitch live action movie. Um, and I don't see any reason that they would be stopping anytime soon. I hope they stop. I hope they learn their lesson. Unfortunately, Disney has lots of capital at their disposal. And I mean, I don't know if they made a loss off of this or not. I don't think they're going to make that much of a profit, but they're still putting out content and they're still making money. So they're not really going to stop per se until it really, really fails. And to be honest, I think their their doom may be upon us, and I hope it is in terms of something drastic happening with their films doing really, really poorly, and them realizing, okay, we need to change some things up. And maybe that's going to be this new Captain America movie that's needed like 3 different reshoots. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry, I was just looking up the total money that Mufasa brought in because I was really curious after you said that.
Yeah,
It turns out that the the amount that it cost to make the film was 200 million, and it, as of now, has made 122 million globally. So it's right now at a $78 million deficit. Hopefully, well, not hopefully, because actually I hope they get totally lambasted for this. Like, they don't make it back, because you don't deserve to put out good content and get rewarded for it. or bad content and get rewarded for it. Excuse me. In this case, they're right now at about 60% of the total cost it took to make it. We'll see. As of now, Sonic is beating out Mufasa at the box office. So,
Let's
yay,
go.
Sonic.
We got Keanu Reeves with a gun as Shadow the Hedgehog. Okay, as much as I hate on John Wick, I think Keanu Reeves is a great actor. So,
Oh yeah, facts.
I think he also is great for the role of Shadow. So go watch that movie. I don't care if it's bad or not. It's Shadow and it's Sonic, and it's been great. So
I will say, if you're in the theater and you're going Mufasa or Sonic, I haven't even seen Sonic. Go watch Sonic. Do not watch Mufasa.
I'm just I didn't think I'd ever give a movie less than 1 point, but I gave this movie a 0.8. So
Yeah,
surely because of the fact that it has Shadow the Hedgehog, I would give it 1 point.
that's hilarious. Okay.
um, Nostalgia. Okay, okay.
Well,
He looks awesome.
you know what looks awesome is when you guys come back to watch us next
Okay,
week.
that
That's
was
right.
forced. You slob.
Not as forced as this movie, but we'll see you all then.